There's always just one team that throws a wrench in the system, and if Duke continues winning, it looks like it'll be them.
It actually happened. Everything fell into place over the last 2 weeks, and now 7-5 Duke somehow finds themselves in the ACC Championship, with the chance to do one of the funniest things imaginable: win. Duke football will have the entire country watching to see what happens in their game against Virginia, because the playoff implications are immense, and we'll take a look at what the result there can mean for every team still in the playoff hunt. There are just 9 conference championship games this weekend, and I'll say these 6 are the ones to watch. Every result from all of these games will have a direct impact on who makes it into this year's playoffs. But before we jump into that, let's take a look at the teams who saw their chances crumble over the weekend. These teams all lost their games, with some of them being very crucial, like SMU losing to Cal or Michigan losing to Ohio State. SMU would have made the ACC Championship with a win, and while I do feel for the players, I think we can agree the new matchup is much more interesting for all the fans who just want to see chaos. These fallen teams all won their games, but for one reason or another, like still missing their conference championship or not moving up enough in the CFP poll, they're out. This leaves us with 18 teams vying for just 12 playoff positions. So get ready to see teams fall apart at the 11th hour, committee snubs, and absolute chaos as teams tumble into the postseason. Let's first start with teams who don't have to worry about their spot in the playoffs, as they're in no matter what: the mortal locks. Ohio State beat Michigan in the game, and while they started out a bit slow in this game, they took control in the second half and didn't let go, cruising to a convincing victory. This team is just flat out boringly good. The closest game they played all year was a 7-point victory against Texas in week 1, and their next closest margin of victory was 18 points, which they've weirdly done 3 times. They haven't had a game in doubt all year, and here's hoping that'll change when they play Indiana on Saturday. Indiana is the only other undefeated team in college football, and while their game against OSU really has no bearing on the playoffs because both teams will receive a bye regardless of the outcome, this game will likely decide the Heisman race between Fernando Mendoza and Julian Sayin. It should provide some answers on whether Indiana can compete with the very best in college football, or show us that Ohio State is an unstoppable killing machine primed to go back-to-back. Please, God, don't let that happen. Georgia sat out of SEC conference play last weekend, taking on the team right behind Duke in the ACC, Georgia Tech. The Bulldogs got it done in a pretty ugly game where their offense looked stagnant, but the bigger news was Texas A&M losing to Texas, which secured Georgia's spot in the SEC Championship. Georgia is currently ranked 3rd in the CFP poll, and a win against Alabama in the SEC Championship would secure them a bye in the playoffs. But even with a loss, they would still probably get a bye anyway. The only way I could see them falling out of the top 4 is if Alabama jumps them after winning the SEC Championship, and Texas Tech jumps them as well if they win the Big 12. This would really only happen if the committee is very heavily weighing conference champions, which is purely speculative at this point, so we'll just have to see where the cards fall should this scenario actually play out. Oregon is the first team we'll talk about that can truly sit back and relax, not participating in any more games until the playoffs. They were able to avoid the landmines on the end of their schedule and are positioned to host a game in Eugene, which should prove to be a tough trip to make for whatever team actually matches up with them. I guess there is a world where Texas Tech falls out of the top 4 if they lose to BYU, elevating Oregon by default, but that would be punishing a conference loser, which the committee seems set on not doing. So just expect to see Oregon hosting a game in the first round. Texas A&M fell to Texas over the weekend, which is unfortunate but not the end of the world. It means the Aggies do lose out on what would have been their first trip to the SEC Championship, but there is a silver lining. The team can now regroup, rest up, shake off their first loss of the season, and begin preparing for what will be a home playoff game at Kyle Field. While a first round bye seems nice, the playoff system is such a lottery that it's really hard to say what you actually want to be ranked until the draw happens. I guarantee last year when top-seeded Oregon saw how they would have the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee, they probably wish they were anywhere but the 1 seed. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with seeding, but this team is still sitting pretty. Texas Tech is a team in an interesting game this weekend. While we've only mentioned Big Ten and SEC Championship participants to this point, Texas Tech actually plays in a game where their opponent will be fighting for their playoff life. This means the Red Raiders will have to be prepared because BYU is going to be coming at them with everything they have. When these teams met in the regular season, Texas Tech dispatched them pretty easily in their closest margin of victory at an absurd 22 points. The Red Raiders' only loss came without their starting quarterback in a tight one to Arizona State. But other than that, this team has looked pretty unbeatable all year, with a stellar defense led by Jacob Rodriguez. With a win, they keep their bye position, but with a loss, we'll just have to see if the committee keeps them at 4 or drops them. Next, we have Oklahoma. Their game against LSU was pretty gross, but that's alright. They won, and now they locked up their spot in the playoffs. However, I am worried about this offense. John Mateer is definitely solid, but the team ranks towards the bottom of the SEC in rushing yards per game and only around the middle for passing yards. On the flip side though, their defense is outstanding, allowing the least amount of yards per game in the SEC. That is to be expected of a team coached by the architect of those great Clemson defenses, but it'll be interesting to see who this team is matched up with and if their offense will be up to the task. They're currently ranked 8th in the CFP poll, which is the final spot for hosting a playoff game, but an Alabama win in the SEC championship would likely bounce them into an away game. Ole Miss is hands down the most fascinating team still in the playoff race. If you mostly just watch the games and don't really pay attention to the behind-the-scenes circus of college football, then let me be the first to tell you that Ole Miss will not have their regular season coach in the playoffs. Lane Kiffin took the LSU job, which felt like a slap in the face to the people of Oxford. So they told him to kick rocks on down to Baton Rouge and now have their defensive coordinator taking the reins. This whole situation could itself be a 30-minute video, and while many people have all sorts of opinions on the current state of college football and Lane Kiffin as a person, that's not what this video is about. But it does leave Ole Miss in a very strange spot. Looking at their schedule, they've had a very successful year, but it's impossible to know what to expect of a team when they're coming in with a new coach and a large chunk of their offensive coaching staff completely gone. The committee didn't punish them for losing their coach, which is good, so they will be hosting a game in Oxford in the first round. If you're a Rebel fan, the games this weekend are important, as they will decide who you come up against in the first round. If Ole Miss manages to hold on to the 6th seed, that means they'll play against the 11th seed, who would likely be Virginia if they beat Duke, or one of the American Conference teams if Duke wins. Either way, just holding on to this 6th seed would lock up a way easier matchup than falling to the 7, where you could easily come up against teams like BYU, Notre Dame, or Alabama. And lastly in this tier is Alabama. Alabama is going to the playoffs regardless of the SEC championship result. I know it seems like there's a chance they could fall out because they're right on that bubble line, but there isn't. On Tuesday, the committee moved Alabama ahead of Notre Dame in the CFP rankings, and make no mistake, it was not because they were overly impressed with the Crimson Tide very nearly blowing a 17-point lead to Auburn. It's to fit their narrative. Say they left Alabama at 10. Alabama loses to Georgia in the SEC championship, and BYU beats Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship. BYU would make it in, which would leave Alabama in that 10 spot out. The committee would never allow this to happen. The entire conference championship structure as we know it would break down if schools got the feeling they could be punished for playing in them. So what does the committee do? They have Alabama jump Notre Dame after they beat a coachless team with 5 wins, because that ensures they can keep Alabama in the playoffs no matter what. So that then takes us to Notre Dame. Notre Dame isn't in the Mortal Locks tier, they're in the Notre Dame tier. Clever, I know. This team is literally just in purgatory for the weekend, and one outside result will completely decide their fate. They aren't jumping Alabama, so they have to pray they can hold on to the 10 spot, and the only team that can knock them out now is BYU. A BYU win in their conference championship means they're in the playoffs, and Texas Tech is not falling out, so someone has to get bounced, and Notre Dame would be that someone. This is one of the pitfalls of not playing in a conference, but Fighting Irish fans should be pleased to know that Texas Tech is heavily favored against BYU. While we won't be seeing touchdown Jesus again this season, as there's no chance Notre Dame will host a game, they are still likely to get in unless the Cougars can pull off an upset. Alright, let's open up the Control Their Destiny tier with BYU. I think it's been laid out pretty clearly, but this team simply needs to win to get in. Honestly, BYU is getting screwed. 11-1 with 2 ranked wins behind teams with worse wins and an additional loss, but at least they do still control their own fate. The regular season proved it will not be easy, but this team has the talent to get past Texas Tech. You have to realize that with teams like BYU being strategically left at 11th and Alabama moving up seemingly out of nowhere, the college football playoff rankings are hardly even rankings. It's really just a way for the committee to decide whatever benefits them the most and then reshape the narrative around that. I mean, for God's sake, eye test is a real metric the committee uses to justify having Notre Dame ahead of Miami, which we will touch on soon, but for now let's just keep going. Virginia did well to finish first in the ACC regular season this year, and it definitely didn't have anything to do with them not playing SMU, Miami, Pittsburgh, or Georgia Tech. This conference is way too big, which is why they currently have Duke in their championship. But focusing on Virginia, it's again pretty simple. Beat Duke and you're the 11th seed in the playoffs. Lose and it's better luck next year. Tulane and North Texas are both in great spots. The CFP poll ranked them both ahead of James Madison, which confirms that the winner between the two will be going to the playoffs. This game on Friday is going to be awesome. Both of their coaches are taking other jobs at bigger schools next year, so this will be the last game for one of them, and it's all on the line for the players. The winner will probably snag the 12 seed, but if Duke wins the ACC, that'll push them up to the 11 seed. It won't make the biggest difference though, as they'll be seen as massive underdogs no matter their opponent. Either way, watch out for this game because it should be intense. Moving down into need a little luck, we only have one team, James Madison. Everything played out perfectly for JMU last weekend, with Duke somehow finding themselves in the ACC championship. Now all they need to do is win their matchup against Troy, where they are 3 touchdown favorites, and have Duke just win one more game. These are the only 2 things that need to happen for 2 group of 5 teams to wind up in the playoffs, which would definitely piss off a lot of Power Conference fans. But it could add a little bit of excitement to the first round should they be up to the test. And finally, for the last time this year, we have the pray category. Let's address the giant blue elephant in the room, Duke. It's unbelievable.
It's just not believable, Cotton.
I eliminated this team from contention a few weeks ago, but here they are, back from the dead. However, it should be noted that even though they are in a Power 4 conference championship, they're still very far from the playoffs, which is nuts. Let's assume they beat Virginia on Saturday and win the ACC. With their 5 losses, they would still need outside help, the big one being Troy beating James Madison. But even after that, they would still likely need UNLV to lose the Mountain West. UNLV only has 2 losses, and I would be pretty worried that the committee would take them over an 8-5 Duke team. The Stars have a line to get Duke to this point though, so I guess anything can happen. And while we're at it, let's just cover UNLV. It's literally the exact same scenario. They need to beat Boise State and then need JMU to lose and Duke to win. At that point, it would just be up to the committee to decide. But of the teams with odds to make the playoffs, theirs is the worst. And let's wrap it up with Miami. Personally, sorry Miami fans, but I just don't see their path like a lot of people seemingly do. On paper, it looks like they're just outside, but they haven't jumped above Notre Dame yet. And I don't see that happening with neither team playing this weekend. However, if their path does truly exist, here is what I found. BYU losing to Texas Tech. Although the committee could just leave them at 11, Miami has to hope they can overtake BYU and move up 1 spot closer to the playoffs. This would put them right behind Notre Dame, a team they have a similar resume to and beat earlier in the year. This really would put a lot of pressure on the committee because leaving Miami out at that point sets a precedent that they only really care about head-to-head matchups when it favors what they want. Another slight possibility would be a BYU loss and an Alabama thrashing against Georgia. If the committee really turns on conference losers, they could drop a 3-loss Alabama below Miami if they lose by, say, something crazy like 40-50, opening up that 10 spot for the Hurricanes regardless of jumping Notre Dame or not. But I really would not be getting my hopes up if I was a Miami fan. In my mind, if the committee was planning on putting them above Notre Dame and taking that head-to-head matchup seriously, they would have done so already. I think this whole ordeal really just shows the flaws within the current system of things. It'll never be perfect, and you'll always have teams complaining about being left out, as was the case with the 2-team and the 4-team playoffs. I mean, they could expand to 16 teams or 32 teams, and then you'd have 7-5 schools complaining about being left out. It's really just the nature of the beast. But there has to be a more transparent ranking process. They can't just pick and choose when to use different metrics to help certain teams, and if I'm being honest, I really don't know what the best fix is. But that's why it's the best and worst part of the year. We do have a great championship week ahead of us, and I am still working on that bracket challenge on cfbspot.com, so I will let you guys know when that's up. But I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you before the playoffs.